It's amazing what lives within our oceans. Ecosystems of life entirely separated from our comfortable surface existences. It's a momentous event when the worlds interact. People cheer when they see dolphins breach above the waves. There are organizations devoted to helping the sea turtle population make their way back to the water, and so on. Sometimes, though, it ain't so pretty. Sometimes, things will rise from the depths that are so horrible, we quickly realize why some creatures evolved to live on land. There was a town I lived in once that learned this lesson. I won't bother giving you the name of it. It doesn't exist on any map anymore. It was a healthy town once, built right into a beautiful bay. I couldn't have asked for better neighbors. The street markets were filled with fresh, cheap seafood, caught right in our own little cradle of ocean. The people didn't want for much, and the land provided plenty. We should have known it was too good, but we didn't. We barely even reacted to the first warning that the sea had offered us. Old Roger Scraggins was the perfect picture of a man who didn't know the times had passed him by. While most folk went out to fish using the latest and greatest technology, Roger would take his modest boat out armed with little more than a wide fishing net and a cooler full of beer. Sometimes, a few of the townsfolk would like to see him off, watching a true legend at work. He'd nod to us, his eyes permanently squinted from years of being on an open deck. We'd watch him use his heavily scarred hands to do the work of several men, effortlessly gliding his boat through the lapping waves. The man had a sixth sense about him, knowing where the fishing was good, even if it didn't make a lick of sense. On rare occasions, before he'd get on his boat, he'd ask a few of us observers if we'd like to help old Scraggins. We'd gladly take him up on this offer, as it usually meant he'd be catching a heap of fish that day, and he was kind enough to let us take some home for our ice boxes. The day of the first sign started off like one of these moments. I remember Roger staring off at the opening of the bay as the arms of the mountain range cradled our slice of ocean. Big on today. Gonna need all hands on deck to help old Scraggins. His voice grumbled, worn from years of breathing in brine and cigars. He glanced over at me and two other young men and gave a quick nod. We knew that was our cue to hop on board, and within a matter of moments, we were cruising out to the middle of the bay past the Esca. The Esca was an old, worn-out lighthouse directly in the middle of the bay. At some point, long ago, it probably served its purpose. But years of rising water levels left it on a small island, the red and white lighthouse slightly leaning to one side, as if it were tired of its vigil. Good sailors knew the best spots were past the Esca, but still within the comfort of the bay. Roger slowed the engine once we got far enough away from the weary beacon, and we quickly followed every order he managed to growl out. Untangle them nets! Cast it out! Fasten it tight! Within moments, the ship carried its own fishnet cloak trailing behind it, lost in the deep blues beneath us. The four of us sat in silence, letting the rolling waves and gull call overhead do all the talking for us. Roger interrupted their conversation with a shout. Get him up on out of here! With that, we set to work pulling in the net and setting up the winch to get it out of the water. Each of us heaved, the thick cords of rope rough on our hands, new calluses forming over the old. The amount of effort I had to exert to heave the net closer to the boat told me one thing. Roger's sense was right, as always. sweat poured from my brow as the rising mass of fins, tails, and beady eyes came into view by the back of the boat. We hooked the net up to the winch, and with a rusty whine, the crane began to lift our hull out of the water. The shimmering mix of soft azure scales wriggling just above us confirmed we had a fine haul of bluefish. The crane sighed as it placed the net between us all on the deck. Roger squinted further, analyzing the writhing clump in front of us. "S'pose that'll do," he grumbled approvingly, working to undo the net. Then we heard the voice. It was a small voice, like that of a little girl. "Help me, please!" It was coming from inside the net. We worked at a quickened pace to undo the net, thinking we might have accidentally scooped up a diver as we were trailing the net behind us. As we sifted through the mass of wriggling fish, however, there wasn't anyone inside. Just fish. "Help! I can't breathe!" The voice was just a little louder, but was still faint, almost like it came from the wind itself. "Where are you?" Roger called out, his hands deep in bluefin as he searched for the elusive victim. We continued to search through the piles of fish until I heard the whisper come from the collection right in front of me. "Right here!" Something compelled me to grab from the pile, and I pulled a single fish out. There, a bluefin rested in my palms, just like any of the other fish we caught. It turned its face to look at me. As the fish's mouth gasped for air, it spoke. "Can't breathe! Can't go back! It hurts!" "Yeah!" Roger's cry caused me to drop the fish back into the pile and stumble back. He immediately looked over at me and the other two volunteers. "Didn't you just hear?" We all nodded, too terrified to speak. The four of us just stared down at the speaking fish. It was clear that we were all just trying to process what happened. We didn't get a lot of time. Another fish in the pile piped up. "The air! Painful to breathe!" Then another. "Can't go back! Can't move! Dying! Help!" 3 small cries became 10 desperate wails, became a choir of screaming pleas. Their volume rattled my brain, forcing me to put my hands over my ears to try to drown out the nautical lament. Even with my hands blocking the noise, they were still loud enough to be heard as plain as day. Some were just sobbing at that point. Some were still struggling to explain the pain. "Scraggings! We have to throw them back in!" one of the other crew called out. Immediately, all of the fish stopped their various cries, screams, and pain pleas. Then, in unison, they spoke. "No! Can't go back! Can't go back! Can't go back!" They continued the chant through pained voices. We stood dumbstruck as the chorus repeated their mantra, getting weaker with each verse as more and more fish stopped moving. Eventually, it was down to one voice, the same voice that spoke in the beginning. "Can't go back! Neither should you." We waited for clarification that never came. It was Roger who snapped us out of the mortified daze. "We bring 'em back. Double the usual haul for each and year not to tell a soul about this." But I tried to protest. I thought it was insane. Not only the fact that we were going to just pretend that this didn't happen, but that we bring these fish back to the townsfolk for them to eat. "But nothing. You listen good. Look at 'em. Ain't nothing but fish now. Telling tall tales ain't gonna do you no good but put you in a loony bin. We take this to the grave, lads." Looking at the other two, it was clear I was the odd man out. So I relented, and we silently cut through the waves back to the dock. in tow with our cursed bounty from the sea. Once the side of the boat met the crooked wooden planks, I left without taking any of the share. There was no way I was going to take a single one of those fish home. I also made an effort to avoid any fish dishes from that point on. Looking back, that might have been the only thing to save me. Folks started to act a little weirder around town. There was a spike in deaths by drowning, the beaches always looked more crowded, yet the energy was a bit muted, almost like people were waiting for something important. I also recount that it was around this time that the Esca began its operations again. At night, the sweeping, lopsided light would cut through the night air, beckoning the beachgoers to its lonely island. Old Roger Scraggins wasn't the same after that day out at sea either. He'd never let anyone on his boat, spending full days out on sea alone, unloading massive amounts of fish in the dark of night. He was old, but it was as if he finally realized it too. The man's sleepless scowl as he'd stare off into the bay told me so. Then one day, he vanished. He took his boat out like normal, only to never return. We had a search party for his boat, but there was no sign of any wreckage. Despite knowing the reality, I like to tell myself that he packed up what little he had and sailed off for bluer oceans. That he knew what was coming and got out of there before it got worse. It was a misty morning when the flyers first showed up all over town. They were gaudy and loud, with vibrant colors that cut through the hazy gray. In the middle of the poster was a mermaid, sitting in a giant clamshell. They were an advertisement for a new establishment that read, "Come to Anthamusa, the pearl of nightlife entertainment. Live entertainment daily. Bachelors get 1 free drink per night." The advertisement didn't need to list the address, as by the time the morning sun banished away the fog, most of the town was talking about the brand new building sitting near the beach. Some folks said that there was always a building there, but it was dilapidated. Some swore they'd never seen it before. Whatever the case was, there was no denying what we saw that day. The building was a mix of a big city nightclub blended with a classic Grecian temple. Flashing lights clashing with marble white columns. Red carpet in front of a full wall mosaic. The piece that drew the eyes, however, was the neon sign of a mermaid, once again in the clamshell, with the words Anthamusa written below, in a font intentionally meant to look Greek. Needless to say, it was the talk of the town square that day. We didn't have anything like that before. The most interesting thing to do was to go to the local dive bar for a while, hang out on the beach, or go fishing. So as the day gave way to night, the line to get in wrapped around the building. I was able to snag a spot in line pretty early and was really able to take in the place before it became packed. To no surprise, the inside was just as weird and elegant as the outside. The lighting rigs screamed cheap dance club, but the well-sculptured statues of trident-wielding Adonises spoke softly of elegance. I shuffled over to a corner booth, having no intention to make a fool of myself on the dance floor. From there, I watched the stream of people enter through the front doors. Soon enough, the place was packed with eager faces, ready for a night that'd mix up the monotony most found themselves in. Scanning the room, I made 2 observations about the staff of the place that stuck out to me. The first was that they were all young women, gorgeous in their own unique ways. The second was that I've lived in that town all my life, and not once have I ever seen those people before. It was like they came with the building. I didn't dwell on it that much, as one of the women came up to offer a drink. I declined, not being much of a drinker myself, and she simply smiled and moved on to the next booth. By that time, the club was in full swing. Music blaring from the speakers hung from rafters, each pulse of the heavy bass line rumbling my ribcage. Despite not really partaking in much of what the club had to offer, I was just happy to get out of the house for a change of pace. Sometime into the night, there was a shift of energy. The club song overhead faded away, and a voice kicked in on the speakers, gentle and brimming with energy.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we've got some really special live entertainment tonight. I present to you our unforgettable star, Pearl!
I had scoffed at the women's stage name, expecting some elderly woman to get on stage and start us off to a lively game of bingo. However, my jaw nearly hit the table when I saw Pearl take the microphone. Easily around 6 feet tall or so, Pearl had long, flowing blonde hair that curled at the ends. Her seafoam green makeup made her deep blue eyes radiate, even from where I was sitting. She wore a dazzling aqua-colored dress that glimmered under the various stage lights. Her long gloves, akin to a flapper girl's, shimmered as well when she grabbed the microphone. Pearl simply smiled, and when she opened her mouth to sing, it was as if the room fell into a trance. I didn't recognize the song, nor even the language of the lyrics, but I remember it being powerful and beautiful. The notes floated through the air, reverberating with the dancers, causing their movements to be in sync. I caught my own leg tapping to the rhythm as the room was serenaded by her seraphic song. I couldn't tell you if the song lasted minutes or hours. I could only tell you that by the end of the night, most of the clubgoers were dragging themselves out the door with aching, blistered, bloody feet. I remember leaving with a limp, my poor leg feeling literally tapped out. Anthemusa became the talk of the town. You could usually tell who went the night before by their wince in every step or the bags under their eyes. I was fully convinced the entire town would spend each night there had there not been a limit to how many people they let in each night. I was never able to get in after that opening day, despite many attempts afterwards. I had heard from others that more and more the restless crowds would beg Pearl to take the stage sooner so they could dance the night away to her mesmerizing melody. I tried not to let my inability to hear her again get the better of me, but when I started dreaming about her song, it only frustrated me more. I would wake up in a cold sweat trying to recall the voice that moments before was calling to me in my dream. Each waking second, however, stole the memories away of her song, leaving me longing to hear her again. It was a few weeks after the opening that more flyers were distributed around the city, advertising an unforgettable night at Anthemusa. I was determined to get there early enough to snag an entry, but was horrified to hear that people were planning to camp out a day in advance just to secure a spot. Unable to call out of work to join the campers, I resigned myself to missing the event and settling for the phantom singer in my dreams. As the day rapidly approached, however, Pearl's song began to permeate my waking life. People on the street would occasionally hum the same tune I had heard that night, the one I yearned to hear once more. The air itself seemed to carry the tune, leading me back to the elegant club by the waves. I admit, the night the event rolled around, I wasn't in the best of mindsets. I was determined to get in, one way or another. My plan was to wait until the club was in full swing and break in through the back, slip into the crowd, and lose myself in the music. So I waited. I hung around the beach, waiting for the night to wane on long enough to make my move. Once the crowd of unfortunate souls that didn't make it in cleared out, I moved to the back door and tried my luck. To my surprise, the door was unlocked and swung open without a noise. The moment I stepped into the back of the club, I felt something was wrong. I couldn't hear Pearl singing. It was worse than that. I really didn't hear anything. It was nearly silent. The only noise I could make out sounded like a heavy rope being dragged across the ground and a soft, wet noise of eating. As quietly as I could, I snuck over to the doorway that led into the main dance floor to see what was going on. It was a feast. It was a massacre. Dozens of exhausted clubgoers lay limp on the floor, chests heaving as they tried to gain their breath. The women of the club laid them in piles, pulling them aside one by one. I couldn't even call them women at this point, as it was clear they weren't. They were sirens. From their neck down, they retained their human-like proportions, even as they crawled unnaturally on all fours. Their necks, however, were long and winding. The muscles rippled as their heads snaked along the helpless victims. Long gone were their beautiful faces, and in place was a toothy snout with beady, unblinking eyes, searching for the perfect morsel. The realization made me nauseous. They looked like moray eels. I watched as one of the creatures snapped its jaw open, revealing its rows of curved teeth, and began to devour someone, starting with their feet. I was expecting the person to scream as the teeth clamped down, but they merely whimpered, staring up at the ceiling, unblinking. It was as if they were entranced. I knew in that moment that I had to leave. When I spun quickly to retrace my steps, I slammed into something sturdy, sending me backwards. Ignoring the pain, I looked up and confirmed my worst fear. It was Pearl. The siren loomed over me, her elongated neck twisting and wriggling to get a better look at me. She breathed through her dripping maw, heaving as her unflinching eyes bore holes through me. Her sinewy throat muscles began to twitch. I made the quick realization that she was about to sing. I knew I had to act fast, even though a part of me still actually wanted to hear her sing one last time. My hands frantically searched the floor, looking for a quick solution, and found purchase on a metal rod of some sort. I gripped the microphone stand and swung with all my might, connecting right into her eel-like neck. Pearl screeched, wriggling back just enough for me to make a dash for the back door. I didn't stop running until I couldn't anymore, nearly collapsing on the sidewalk deep into town. I was afraid to turn and see a horde of eel women chasing me down, but I was met with silence when I looked. It was just me, panting and out of breath, underneath a cloudless sky. I shambled back home, collapsing into my bed, an exhausted mess. I had intended to go see the law first thing in the morning. That plan quickly unraveled. By morning, no one had remembered Anthemusa. The flyers all across town were gone. The club that was host to a gruesome banquet just the night before was gone, and in its place sat a broken down building weathered with years of ocean winds. There was no proof that Anthemusa had ever existed beside my own experiences. What of the victims, you may ask? That was the worst part of all. Just as the people forgot about the club, so too did they forget about the ones that were taken away. One parent insisted they had always had one daughter, forgetting that she had a twin. The town thought it was strange that we had a doctor's office, but no doctor that was currently practicing. Even if you were to try to show people proof of someone who went missing, eventually they'd just stare off into space. with the same mesmerized look as the people who were devoured whole. The town began its fall into disarray from that point. How do you successfully run a business when you don't realize some of your workers don't exist anymore? Tasks handled by someone long forgotten had to be taken up by others. The town was stretched thin. It's chilling. From that time on, occasionally people would hum fragmented pieces of the song Pearl once sang. They would shed a tear, wipe it away, much to their confusion, like something inside them still remembered. While our town decayed slowly, so too did the Esca. Bits of the painted cement began to crumble off the leaning lighthouse, splashing into the ocean below. I wasn't sure what was holding it up at that point, let alone what kept it working. But the lighthouse continued to shine, grazing the sky with its beams, calling weary travelers to what should have been their safety. Even if we knew what was going to happen to us, would we have been able to stop it? After Anthemusa and the screaming fish, the town I once loved was a former shell of itself. The street markets were filled with twitching, foul-smelling seafood caught in the bay. The surrounding mountains felt more like a cage every day, trapping us in with the rot. Many once thriving businesses were now shuttered, and the bustling port felt like a graveyard. Each unused boat a tombstone. It was during a heavy rainstorm that the third omen arrived. The fisherman who first reported it couldn't believe his eyes, but once those who could mustered the energy to join him, they confirmed what he had found. Hermit crabs. According to him, the man was fishing off the beach early morning at his usual time when he came across the first hermit crab. Its abnormally large size originally startled him. Easily about as big as a coconut crab, the hermit crab came scuttling out of the ocean and paused to stare at the man. It clacked its claws and twitched its mandibles as if waiting for something. From the front, the fisherman noticed its shell shape was incredibly odd. It was when the crab turned itself, giving the man a better look, that he jumped back in alarm. Dozens more crab began to shuffle out of the brine, and in a panic the man scurried off to find anyone, to share what he saw. By first light, a crowd of people gathered to stare at the cast of crabs, myself included. It was true, the crabs were enormous, but large crustaceans weren't what brought the crowd to the shores. It was their shells. They were just as the man described. They were human heads. Each crab carried a human head on its back, connected to where the neck would have been. As the crabs shuffled about on the shore, the human heads moved their eyes and stared. The sight felt like an aberration to all that was good. It was as if the ocean itself was mocking us at that point. Someone in the crowd behind me gasped. "Nate?" she cried out. Pushing past us, she sprinted to the beach. Surprisingly, the crabs didn't make any effort to move away. People in the crowd tried to call out to her, to get her to stay away, but the woman was frantic. "No, you don't understand! It's Nate! I recognize his face from anywhere!" The woman hunched in front of one of the crabs, and one by one, people from the crowd approached tentatively, seeing that she was okay. As I got closer, I noticed that each crab shell face was different. The crab in front of the woman turned around to allow her to be face to face with its shell. She sobbed louder, reaching a hand out to touch it, only hesitating at the last moment. The shelled face stared up at the woman, emotionless. Hair that was once probably curly was matted, tangled with seaweed. Its eyes were dull, carrying no light behind them. "Nate, honey, it's me, Veronica. Remember? I thought I lost you." Her voice trembled. the fresh grief evident in her cadence. Another voice from the crowd spoke out. "Maria?" Another. "Wait, that's Daryl!" More people recognized more faces. By the conversation sprouting up around me, the shells were all faces of people lost at sea. Each sea-swollen face a person once thought to never return, now preserved on the back of a beady-eyed, chitinous creature of the deep. Without any warning, Veronica grabbed the crab and brought the shell to her eye level. With a dull groan, the shell face opened its mouth. Its lips began to move as if it were speaking, but no words came out. Veronica brought it to her ear as if it were whispering a secret to her. Her eyes widened, and though the lips continued to move on the shell, no sound was coming out. Soon, most of the faces on the shells began their silent speeches. People huddled close, listening attentively to every unsaid word their decaying loved one had to say. I did my best to try to hear him, but was only met with the lapping waves on the shore. Veronica had broken the silence. "I understand. I'll go with you." She turned, crab still in hand, and sprinted towards the ocean. Those of us unable to hear the shells tried to get her to stop, but she easily barreled through anyone who stood in her way, charging with an unnatural determination straight for the icy waters. Multiple people grabbed the crabs and began their frenzied rush into the briny arms of the bay. The few of us remaining were left helpless as their bodies crashed uncoordinated into the water, sinking immediately beneath the surface. We were left in a strangling silence, staring out into the choppy water. The silence was short-lived, when a loud rumbling came from the middle of the bay. It came from Esca. The ground beneath our feet quaked as the lighthouse shuddered, its constructed shell crumbling off to reveal what lay underneath. There, on the island, stood a crooked pillar. It was hard to make out what details from the distance, but it looked to be made of flesh, the inky black column twitching slightly. The top of the shape carried a bulb at the end, which continued to give off light, just like the lighthouse did. This light, however, pulsed like a heartbeat. Each pulse rumbled the sand beneath me. It took only a split moment to recognize what Esca truly was. It was an antenna. A huge jolt beneath me threw me to the beach. The Esca continued to pulse, the rhythm of its heartbeat quickening. I got back on my feet, heading inland as fast as I could. Many of the other beachgoers just stared at the Esca, probably too stunned or afraid to know what to do next. I didn't know exactly what was coming either, but I saw enough of the signs back then to know it wasn't time to stand around and find out. I was in the middle of packing brief essentials at my house when the noise began. A low, loud rumble permeated the walls of the room. It was deep and large and mournful, like a pod of whales all sung at the same time. I looked out my window to the bay and dropped my bag to the floor at the side. Packing was no longer a priority. There was nowhere I could go. From the bay rose dozens of huge, thin, pale white mountains in jagged rows. As they rose from the bay, they were all connected to an inky black mass, bigger than anything I'd ever seen. Two pale, film-covered moons came into view, staring down at our village. There was no emotion behind those eyes. It was too ancient for such frivolities. It came for a more primal purpose: to feed. The opening of its maw had blocked out the sunlight. The Esca pulsed, calling the city into its waiting fangs. Many probably went willingly. Some may have made some desperate, futile attempt to leave. Others probably joined my stunned indecision, letting the ocean take back all we'd taken from it. The darkness grew as the fangs overhead ripped through the sky, piercing the clouds above. I closed my eyes, resigned to what would come. I spent a long time in the darkness. I wasn't sure if I was dead or worse. I was too afraid to open my eyes, too afraid to even check if it was possible to open my eyes. I waited to be digested, to be crushed, to be atomized and brought into the cycle of nature as ancient and unrelenting as it is. I couldn't tell you how long I remained in that state. Eventually, I mustered the courage to open my eyes. I had to squint from the blinding rays of the sun. I found myself on the beach, staring out into an empty bay. There was no signs of any buildings, no signs of any civilization whatsoever. There was also no shape in the middle of the bay. The Esca had removed any trace of what was once there besides me. So I left. I traveled for a time, wandering from place to place, wondering why I was the only one spared from being erased. After some time, I finally settled in another bayside town. I soon realized why I am all that remains. This town. It's a beautiful place. I couldn't ask for better neighbors. The street markets are filled with fresh, cheap seafood caught right in our own little cradle of ocean. The people don't want for much, and the land provides plenty. They've also started construction on a lighthouse right in the middle of the bay.
Howdy.
Hey,
Yeah, no, fantastic. It's so good. You did such justice for Scraggins. I loved every second of it. It was absolute.
thanks.
I couldn't have dreamed for better. It's
Thanks.
perfect.
That's such a big compliment. Thank you so much.
No, it was so much fun. Um, yeah. So yeah, I'm not gonna get on the soapbox here, but I figured I'd give you a second to rest your voice because you did just such a fantastic job. Um, so yeah, I got a couple of minutes before I have to jump out of lunch break. So I figured, this gives you a second to rest and see if there was anything like I was saying in the chat. I guess I'll start before there's any questions. If there are any, please, I'm looking at the chat, so please feel free. But I guess inspirations. Like I was talking in the Reddit chat, like when we were first mentioning nautical, and I was like, I don't write stories for prompts because I always feel like I never have a good enough idea fast enough to get a prompt in. Um, tenors. Um, yeah. So, I I am going to actually start doing reprints. I was talking to Tenors about that privately, but he's been pushing me to get my work more places, so I'm gonna start doing that. I'm gonna take it a little more serious. But uh, and I was like, you know what? I want to write. I was reading. I don't know if y'all have ever read that old like children's horror story about like the green ribbon, where that girl had like the green ribbon around her neck, and I thought that was such a good story, and it's so short. But like people who read the green ribbon still remember that story to this day. Like it was short, it was punchy, and it hits like a part of your brain that's just like it's gonna stick there forever. So I was like, I want to write a bunch. Yes, see, Tenors knows exactly. It's where her head falls off. He, it's like you just it's one of those things where it just sticks with you, right? And I reread that story, and it's like what, like 2-3 pages, right? See, it's a short little story. So I was like, well, I would love to write a collection of shorter. Even I know most of my stories are one parters, but I was like, I want to write an even shorter collection of stories. And I had a couple of nautical ideas, and I was like, well, let me just make that into like a mini anthology in a story. And then I also thought of it was hard not to. I'm like, okay, a collection of mini stories about a town that like something is going wrong with it and it just gets worse by the minute. I'm like, that's just Uzumaki. So if I'm gonna take from anyone, why not take from one of the legends, and like take an idea that like a mixture of Uzumaki and a little bit of, you know, my own nautical spin to it. The first idea was the sirens. And then I thought about the talking fish, and then I thought about the crabs. And I guess the first thought overall, I knew from the beginning I wanted it to be a lighthouse that was actually just like a shell around a giant anglerfish. Because anglerfish are crazy to look at. So I was like, yeah, let me just take that, and that's going to be my main thing. And as the story gets worse, more of the thing is revealed. And I was like, well, I want a fun, punchy, short name too. And then I was looking up anatomical parts of anglerfish, and the word Esca just stood out. And I was like, well, that's awesome. And that's literally the part that is the luring part of the giant fish. So why wouldn't I just give it a short, punchy boom? It's Esca. It's just simple, and it kind of sticks. So so yeah, and then I just pierced it together as like, and I was like, is there lighthouses that are in the middle of the bay? Turns out there are, because I like to do my research on stuff, even if it doesn't, like, no one's gonna call me out and be like, why is the lighthouse in the middle of the bay? This story's terrible. I'm giving you 1 star. I'm reporting you to Reddit. So but I still like to do my research on stuff like that. So you know, for Anthemusa, Anthemusa is the name of one of the Greek mythological sites where sirens are based in. So that name has, like, so if someone knows siren mythology, I like to put stuff in my stories where it's just like, if you know, you know. Like, so if someone for some reason knew that an Esca is the light part of an anglerfish, they're in for me with the ride. I put little things in my stories like that where it's like I try to do the research so that those who are as deep in the research with me, they'll be like, oh, I know where he's going with this. And I like to build that anticipation in my audience because I want them to see that payoff. I love having my audience feel smart, like knowing like, oh, I see where this is going, and I want to see this play out. And so when they, you know, catch Anthemusa, like if they're a big Greek myth person, they're like, oh, there are sirens. How is this going to play out? You know, it's always, I always love doing that with some of my stories, and kind of like connecting pieces that, you know, it allows them to be in with the joke or be in with the thing. I'm going to plug and say the story that I've done that the most in is the interview. And that's why I'm reading that. And I'm going to be reading other people's stories. So come on in if you have time on Sunday. I'm going to be reading the interview because I think that's a very, like, if you know, and you need, like, buckle in because that's a ride. But anyway, that's enough of me yapping. I feel like I'm just getting, like, smelling my own stink at this point. So, unless there's any, yeah, exactly. So, smart move, tenors. So hopefully that's enough of a break for your voice. I love every minute of it. I'm so honored that this community accepts me in and deals with me yapping. You can see I continue, like, this is, I write how I speak. I just don't stop. So I'm gonna stop. And I appreciate everything that everyone has done for me forever. And I'm gonna do some more reading tonight. So thank you. Appreciate it.
I stand rigid, in an almost lifeless wasteland 300 meters beneath the surface of the ocean. I can only see a few yards in front of me. I can move my neck, but the cumbersome helmet is fixed and can never move. There are 4 small circular windows, one above me, one on my left and right flank, and one facing directly forward, each providing roughly 10 degrees of vision in their respective directions. There are large gaps in my peripheral no matter where I look. Aside from the helmet, the rest of my dress is made of dense, heavy rubber. There are dozens of abandoned suits identical to mine scattered in the sand. At this depth, a single breach in my suit would mean an almost instant obliteration. The immense pressure will cause water to fill my helmet and enter my body through my nose, eyes, and eardrums, making me to go permanently blind, deaf, and mute. Water will fill my body and open my lungs, making it so I cannot inhale or exhale even if I wanted to. When the water enters, I will excrete every bodily fluid, or rather have it forcefully extracted out of each cavity. The implosion will destroy my brain instantly. I will have to live through unimaginable pain and suffering, but only for a fraction of a second. When someone finds me, if anyone finds me, I will be crumpled like wet paper to the edges of my suit. I can feel dread burning my body from the inside out. A dread small enough that it pierces my skin, but dense enough that I am drowning in it. I can see shadows moving in the corner of my vision, nothing but 2-inch thick glass panes between me and whatever is out there traversing the depths. I want to touch my face and I want to feel my hair, but I can't, or else I will be disintegrated. I cannot differentiate north from south. If I was not standing on shifting sand, I would have no idea which direction is up. It's a feeling of looking down from the top of a skyscraper and having that building suddenly disappear from under your feet. I cannot see the sun. I feel lightheaded, but I'm breathing heavily. How much oxygen do I have left? My heart is beating out of my chest. I can't even reach the back of my suit. I can't breathe. The metal lining of this suit is too tight. I need some breathing room. I feel something moving on the back of my suit, something that's been there this whole time. I think I'm dying. I'm just worried. I think I'm going to die. We just hit a speed bump, that's all. I can't breathe. Lord, save me. There's something on my head. I can feel it. I'm holding my breath, clenching my fist so tight. It's in my suit. It's in my skin. It's tapping on my helmet. Tap, tap, tap. Hello? I asked the void. Is there someone there? Is my helmet creaking under the pressure? Nothing. I'm looking around, but I can't see anything but sand and darkness. If there's someone out there, please help me. I'm trapped. I hear more tapping. 3 short taps on my left, 3 long taps on my right, 3 short taps on the top of my head. Then it peered up from under my front pane. It's crawling slowly and now I can see it. It's an octopus, holding a seashell. It slowly peeks its head up, then starts tapping the glass curiously as if to say hello. I'm so shocked that I can barely get a word out. A wave of relief washes over me, but still I'm hyperventilating. It keeps tapping on the glass with its seashell. Why? What's an octopus doing this deep in the ocean? Tap, 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 tap. It keeps tapping. Tap, 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 tap. What would an octopus this size be doing this deep underwater? It must think I'm a predator or something. Its den must be nearby. The suckers on its tentacles are sticking tightly to the glass as if afraid to touch the ocean floor. A pleasant distraction from my current situation. Tap, 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 tap. I'm listening to the taps. Short, then long, then short again, but I don't understand. The little guy is persistent, tapping so hard that I fear the glass is going to crack. I try to grab the octopus, but it climbs to the top of my suit and sits on my head like a hat, out of reach, still tapping away. Tap, 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 tap. I'm so enthralled by this octopus that I almost forget where I am. Stranded at the bottom of the ocean. No way of knowing which direction home is. I can barely hear my own thoughts over the sound of tapping on my helmet. Tap, 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 tap. The octopus is relentlessly tapping. Stop it! I'm serious! You're gonna break the glass! I say as I grasp for its tentacle and miss. Tap, 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 tap. I finally get a hold of the octopus's tapping tentacle. It squirms around and breaks free. The octopus swims off, leaving behind a cloud of black ink, trailing in a helix around my body. I slowly turn my body, trying to track the octopus. In the sand, there's dozens of half-sunken, bloated corpses reaching out to grab the legs of my diving suit. They've been here for a long time. I fall back, barely out of reach from the closest pair of hands. I crawl backward on my hands and feet as the bodies drag themselves closer, gaining with each drag. They let out suffocating cries for help as the closest ones drag my knees under the sand. I reach out to the void until one of them forcefully pulls down my arm. A tentacle reaches from behind my helmet and unlatches the faceplate.
Let's see, I was inspired because I was going through eBay looking for computer parts because I'm trying to make a new computer, build a new computer. And it got me thinking of like Facebook Marketplace posts. And I was like, it would be so funny if someone put up like this diving suit from the 60s on Facebook Marketplace. And this guy takes the diving suit and gets himself screwed at the bottom of the ocean. But that's not canon. That's just the idea that inspired me to write this story the way that it is. It's open-ended, so I'll go ahead and say that. Yeah, so that's my oh, what was the translation? That's an excellent question. I have the doc pulled up right now. So the very first sentence had the octopus taps. Tap, 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 tap. It keeps tapping. And then the translation beneath that is go. It's the word go. And then, what would an octopus this size be doing this deep underwater? The next sentence, the next phrase, the octopus says, hands, run. I'm listening to the taps, short and long, and short again, still tapping away. And then the next translation, hands coming. I'm so enthralled by this octopus that I almost forget where I am. Next phrase, look behind you. That's what the octopus is saying.
So sick.
Stop, I'm serious. You're gonna break the glass. What's that?
I was just saying that's sick. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Stop it, I'm serious. You're gonna break the glass. The octopus responds, too late. I finally grab a hold of the octopus's tapping tentacle, and then that's when he, does the whole thing. He falls backwards because he sees something spooky. Yeah, that's the translation. I mean, I knew going into this it'd probably be awkward for someone to narrate it, just because it's, how do you narrate Morse code? But I thought it was a really good narration. Thank you so much, Noah.
Yeah, Noah's killing it.
Thank you,
Noah.
Poop. That was an awesome story. I love the bit
Thank
about
you
the
so much.
Facebook Marketplace because I can see like the setting of someone just thinking, okay, this is cheap, I'll just buy it, it's probably fine, and then we're fucked
Yeah.
over.
Does anyone have a question? Other questions for
Yeah.
the story? Cole had asked, I think just to confirm, so it was trying to warn him then.
Oh, yes. The octopus was trying to warn him. The octopus knows that there's these creatures behind him. He's tapping on him like, turn around. They're going to get you. Yeah. Good question, Cole. Thanks.
Bear trap.
Ooh. Bear trap.
Bear trap. There you go. Noah, are you feeling ready to go? And, all right, before Goblin, did you have anything else you wanted to say? Don't want to cut you off.
No, I just want to say, actually, thank you. Thank you for reading my story. Thank you for choosing my story to be in the short list. I had a lot of fun writing it, and I'm having a lot of fun with the autumn prompt too. I can't wait.
Oh,
That's awesome.
thank you for writing it.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
All right, thanks, guys.
It's been about a month now that Kenny's been gone. 3 weeks and 5 days to be exact. He left in his pirogue one night just after sunset to go frogging and never came back. Man just up and disappeared like a fart in the wind. Now it's just me out here on this old houseboat alone. Fell off on the pirogue a week later, hung on a cypress knee. No oar, no frogs, no Kenny. Just a dozen crushed up Budweiser cans and a half a pack of Marlboro Reds. Only thing is, Kenny didn't smoke. They had it towed back in, and I haven't seen the damn thing since. Kept it for evidence, Sheriff Landry said. So now, I'm stuck out here. Unless I want to trudge through 50 miles or so of isolated swampland, and Kenny left with the one good pair of rubber boots we had. Search only went on for a couple more days after that. To no avail, of course. After that much time in the bog, you don't expect to find a body. At least not intact. They called it off on the 1st of October. My husband, Kenny Thibodeau, presumed dead, but still officially considered a missing person. Some said the gators must have got him. Some thought he ran off with another woman. Some had what I'll just call other theories. But no one in the Atchafalaya Basin thought it was an accident. Hell, I ain't stupid. I know exactly what they all whisper about me. It's all the same damn shit they've been saying since I was a young'un. Jezebel, Putin, Swamp Witch. Ha! Let 'em keep talking. Don't bother me none. Not anymore. You gotta have real thick skin out in the bayou, or you'll get tore up from the floor up. Me, I can hold my own. But no one comes around here anymore. Not since Kenny's been gone. Up until a few nights ago, that is. I was in the galley, deheading a batch of shrimp to fry up when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. I froze, with knife in hand. Wasn't expecting visitors, phone never rang. Maybe Landry was poking around with more questions again. I set the knife down onto the counter next to the bowl, then crept over to the front window to peek out. As I squinted through the dense blackness of the night, I saw something. Out on the deck was the faint outline of a large figure standing at the edge. But it wasn't the sheriff. My heart dropped. I stumbled backward from the window in a panic and ran for the knife on the counter. My fingers wrapped around the handle and tap, tap, tap. The sound pulsed through the floorboards, heavy beneath my feet. Sharp, like the edge of a knuckle hitting a hollow door. I lifted the knife, shrimp guts still dripping from the edge of the blade. Then I took a deep breath and flipped the deck light on. Nothing. I paused for a moment, scanning what little area was illuminated by the dim, flickering yellow light. No boats, no critters, no large dark figures. Just a cacophony of cicadas screaming into the void and the glimmering eyes of all the frogs Kenny never caught. I shut the light back off and threw the curtains closed. Man, law! My mind was playing tricks on me. At least that's what I thought at the time. Must have just been a log bumping into the pontoons. I shrugged it off and went back to the shrimp. Deveined, cleaned, and battered. I chucked the shrimp heads out the galley window for the catfish, then sat down and had myself a good supper. Once I'd picked up the mess and saved the dishes, I went off to get washed up before bed. After I'd settled under the covers, I started thinking about Kenneth. He wasn't a bad man. Not really. Sure, he was a rough round the edges couillon with a mean streak like a water moccasin when he got to drinking. But he meant well. I turned over and stared at the empty side of the bed, listening to the toads sing me to sleep. The light of the next morning cut through the cabin window like a fillet knife through a sake layer. I dragged myself up and threw on a pot of coffee. French roast. I had a feeling I'd need the kick in the ass that day. I sat on the front deck, sipping and gazing out into the morning mist when I heard the unmistakable sound of an outboard approaching. I leaned forward. It was Sheriff Laundrie. He pulled his boat up along starboard and cut the engine off.
Hey, Sherry, how you holding up?
I'm doing all right. How's your mom and them?
Oh, just fine, he chuckled. Mind if I get down for a second? Just got a couple more questions for you.
Hey, Lon, I said, gesturing for him to come aboard. Let me get you a cup of coffee.
No, that's okay. Already had my fill this morning.
I nodded. He stepped onto the deck with his hands resting on his belt and shuffled towards me, his boots click-clacking against brittle wood.
Now, I'm not one to pry into personal affairs between a husband and his wife, but since this is still an ongoing investigation, I gotta ask, how was your relationship with Kenny?
I took a long sip, then set the mug down. Suppose it was like any other, I guess.
Did you two ever fight?
Sometimes, I shrugged. He paused for a beat, then spat out his wad of dip into the water.
Were y'all fighting the night he came up missing?
Not that I recall.
Not that you recall.
Well, I know one thing, he said, turning to look out into the water.
There's something fishy about all this. Man didn't just disappear. Something must have happened to him.
I took a deep breath. Sheriff, I want to know where he's at just as much as y'all do.
That so?
He smiled, and I folded my arms in front of me.
Funny thing is, Miss Thibodeau, you ain't cried once since Kenny's been gone.
A cool breeze kicked up just then,
sending the knotted up seashells and bones I used as a wind chime clanging together. He looked over at it with a hairy eyeball. With all due respect, Laundry, I do my crying alone. Now, can I get back to my coffee? Got a lot to do today. Always something needs fixing on this old houseboat. He tipped his hat and shot another stream of orange spit over the side of the deck, then got back on his boat and took off. Day flew by after that. Between baiting and throwing out the trot lines, setting up crab traps, and replacing a rotten deck board, I already had my hands full. But then, when I went to scrape the algae off the sides of the pontoons, I found a damn leak that needed patching. There was a small hole in the one sitting right under the galley. Looked like something sharp had poked through it. Too sharp to be a log. Maybe a snapping turtle got a hold of it, I thought. Ain't never seen one bite clean through metal before, though. Before I knew it, the sun was going down and it was time to start seeing about fixing supper. No crabs, but when I checked my lines, I'd snagged me a catfish. After I dumped a can of tomatoes into the cast iron, I put a pot of rice cooking to go with my cuba on. I was in the middle of filleting the catfish when I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. I jerked forward, slicing a deep gash into my thumb in the process. Merde! God damn it to hell! It was damn near down to the bone. I grabbed a dish rag and pressed it tight against my gushing wound, holding my hands over the sink. The blood seeped right through. Drops of red slammed down against the white porcelain with urgency, splattering as they landed. Tap, tap, tap. I winced and raised my head to look out the galley window. Nothing but frog eyes shining through the night. What in the fuck is that noise? I shouted angrily to an empty room. Just crickets. The frogs didn't have shit to say that time. I checked the front deck, of course, but wasn't nobody out there. Then I hurried over to the head to get the first aid kit, bleeding like a pig and cussing up a storm the whole way. Once I'd cleaned and bandaged up my cut, I went back into the galley, determined to finish my cooking. I threw the catfish guts out the galley window, ate my fill, then went to bed. Didn't hear it again that night. Ain't nothing I could do about it right then anyway. Kenny lived with the one good flashlight. I was just gonna have to investigate the damn noise in the daytime. Had to be something down there in the water tapping at the hole. The next morning, I woke up to my thumb throbbing. When I changed the bandage, let me tell you, it was nasty. Rather than a boiled crawfish and oozing yellowish green pus from the chunk of meat I cut out of myself. The catfish slime had gotten into my blood and lit up my whole hand like it was on fire. Damn, must have not cleaned it enough. I scrubbed the whole hand with Dawn, doused the gash with more rubbing alcohol, then wrapped it back up with gauze and tape. Didn't have much more time to tend to it than that. I had shit to do. First order of business, after my coffee of course, was checking the traps and lines. The air smelled like a storm coming. Deep freezer was getting low on stock, and I was running out of time. A cold spell was ripping through the bayou, and the winter was right on its ass. I blared some CZ top when I started hauling in. One by one, I brought up an empty trap, still set with bait. It seemed only the tiny nibblers of the basin had been interested in the rotten chicken legs. Until I pulled up the last trap, the one set closest to the galley window. Damn thing was mangled. I'm talking beat the hell up. Something had tore clean through the metal caging, ripping it open and snatching the bait from inside. I slammed the ruined trap onto the deck in frustration. Damn gators! Motherfucker! I stared down at the tangled mess of rusty metal. Maybe that's what's been knocking around down here, I thought. Just a canal. Overgrown reptile fucking up my traps and thieving my bait. Still, something was gnawing at me. The taps. They seemed too measured, too methodical, and always in sets of 3. Gators, well, they can't count, far as I'm aware. Had a little more luck on the trot lines. Not by much, though. Got a couple fiddlers, another good-sized blue cat, and a big stupid gar that got itself tangled up and made a mess of half the line. Had to cut him loose and lost about 50 feet. The bastard thrashed so hard he just about broke my wrist, teeth gnashing and snapping like a goddamn bear trap. Of course my thumb was screaming after that, but I didn't have time to stop. I threw the catch in the ice chest and rebaited the rest of the line I had left. After that, it was time to figure out once and for all just what the hell was making that racket under the hole. I went around the back to start looking there. Nothing loose, nothing out of place. I leaned forward to look over the side. Then I heard a loud splash. I snapped back a brat. The sound had been coming from the other side of the houseboat. I ran back through the cabin out onto the front deck. "Aw, for Christ's sake!" Ice chest lid was wide open. Water splattered all over the deck. I approached slowly and looked inside. Fiddlers were still flapping at the bottom, but that big blue cat, gone. Damn thing must have flopped itself out and back into the water. Lucky son of a bitch. No use in crying about it, though. I was just going to have to make do with what I had left. I closed the lid back and shoved the ice chest further from the edge with my foot. Then, when I did, I noticed something. On the side that was closest to the water, there was something smeared across it. I blinked. It was a muddy handprint, a big one. Too big to have been mine. May Gardy Dawn! I bent down to look closer. It wasn't an old, dried-up print. It was fresh, wet, slimy, still dripping. My heart dropped. I slowly stood back up and looked out into the water. First the tapping, now this. Pay bon! Something or somebody was messing with me, and they done picked the wrong one. I went inside and grabbed the salt. Then I stomped back out and started at one end, pouring until I had a thick line of it across the border of the deck. Now, cross that, motherfucker! I folded my arms across my chest. Bayou was still. Air was silent and heavy. The sun began to shift, peaking just above the tree line and painting the water with an orange glow. For about another hour, I searched the houseboat left, right, up, and down. Never found nothing that could explain the tapping, though. I dragged the ice chest inside to start cleaning the fish just as the nighttime critters started up their song. Figured I could get the most use out of the nibblers by frying it up with some etouffee, so I started boiling my grease while I battered the strips of fish. My thumb was pulsing like a heartbeat by then, and the gauze was an ugly reddish brown. Wasn't looking forward to unwrapping it later. That's when I realized I hadn't heard the taps yet. Maybe the salt had fixed it. Maybe it had been a bayou spirit coming to taunt me. Some tay-tay looking to make trouble. Shit, maybe it was a cauchemar. Or the rougarou. Swamp ain't got no shortage of boogeyman. I tried to shrug it off and finish fixing supper, but the anticipation of hearing those taps kept me tense like a mooring line during a hurricane, ready to snap at any moment. The absence of them was almost just as unsettling. By the time the food was ready, I could barely eat. That night, I laid there in the darkness and waited for them. Breath held, mind racing, heart thumping. They never came. Sleep didn't find me easy. I was up half the damn night tossing and turning, trying to listen, trying to forget about it. The thoughts were eating me alive and my body was struck with fever. Sweat seeped out from every pore, soaking my hair and burning my eyes. And my thumb hurt so bad I was about ready to get up and cut the damn thing off. I rested my eyes for what felt like only a second before that orange beam cut through. My body was stiff. Felt like a damn corpse rising up. I looked down at my hand and realized I'd forgotten to change the bandage the night before. Fuck! The whole hand was swollen and starting to turn purple near the thumb. I hobbled over to the head, trembling. As soon as I unwrapped the gauze, the smell of rot hit the air instantly. The edges of my wound had turned black, and green ooze cracked through the thick crust of yellow every time I moved it. I was gonna need something stronger than alcohol, but I couldn't afford no doctor. I went over to the closet, grabbed the hurricane lamp, and carried it back to the head with me. Carefully, I unscrewed the top, bit down on a rag, then poured the kerosene over my hand, dousing the wound. It fizzed up like coke on a battery when it hit the scab. As it mixed with the pus and blood, it let out a hiss, the infection being drawn out. My whole body locked up as the pain ripped through me. Felt like 1,000 fire ants chewing on me at once. I bit down on that rag so hard I tore a hole through it. Between the fumes and the agony, I nearly passed out, but it had to be done. Left the kerosene on there till it stopped burning, then rinsed off the slurry of brown foam that had collected on my thumb. With the hard part over, I smeared a glob of pine resin over the cut, then wrapped it back up real tight with fresh gauze and tape. That ought to do it, I thought. At least the tap seemed to be gone for now, and I could focus on handling my business. Goes without saying, didn't eat the morning coffee that morning, so I got myself dressed and headed out to front to start my day. I took a deep breath, pulling the thick swamp air into my lungs. It didn't settle right. I scrunched my eyebrows. There was a smell to it, an odor that didn't belong. Something unnatural. Couldn't quite put my finger on what exactly it was, but I knew it wasn't right. That's for damn sure. Salt line was left untouched though, at least my barrier was working. I bent down to pull in the trot light, and just before I got my hands on it, a bubble popped up from the water, just under where I was standing. A huge one, and then another, and another. Each bubble was bigger than the last, like something breathing down there. As they popped, a stench crept up into the air, hitting me in the face like a sack of potatoes. That smell. Poo-yay! La croak! It was worse than a months-old dead crawfish pulling out to the mud. So thick I could taste it crawling down my throat. I backed away from the edge of the deck, covering my face with my good hand. Then the damn phone rang, shattering the silence and making me just about shit. The bubble stopped. I stared at the water for a second. Smell still lingered, the pungent musk of rot mixed with filth. After the fourth ring, I rushed inside to shut the phone up. Hello? I breathed, more as an exasperated statement rather than a greeting. "Sherry!" an old crackly-throated voice said. "Oh, hey there, Miss Maggie. How you doing?" "I'm making all right, child. Hey, listen, is Kenny around?" I sighed. "No, Maggie, he's still missing." "Oh, shoot. Well, tell him I need some help with my mooring line when he gets back in. Them thing's about to come undone." "Okay, I'll let him know. You take care now. Bye-bye." I hung up the phone, shaking my head. Miss Maggie Wellers was the old lady that lived up the river from me. Ever since old Mr. Wellers dropped dead of a heart attack last year, Maggie's been, as we call down here, paid to law. Poor thing only had a handful of thoughts left rattling around that head of hers. Grief took the rest. The loss of her husband was just too much for her, bless her heart. Her son Michael had been a past lover of mine. T-Mike, they called him. He and I saw each other for a while back in high school, till he up and disappeared too. After graduation, he took off down the road and ain't no one seen him since. Guess I got a habit of losing men to the bayou. Me and Maggie stayed in touch over the years. Couldn't help but feel an obligation. She was just trying to hold on to whatever piece of her boy she had left. Kenny even started helping her out with things around the houseboat once old Wellers kicked the bucket. Looked like now we both be fending for ourselves from here on out. By the time I got back out to the trot lines, the stink had almost dissipated. My thumb was still tender, but the pine resin had sealed it and took the sting out. Enough playing around, time to fill up the ice chest. I went to pull at the line, but it didn't budge. What the fuck? Maybe it was snagged on a log. I yanked again, hard, and nothing. Almost felt like the damn line was pulling back. Maybe I'd hooked something too big to haul in. I planted my feet, wrapped the line around my hands twice, then ripped at it with all my might. Suddenly, the line gave way and I went tumbling backward onto the deck. I landed hard on my tailbone, sending a shock wave up my spine like a bolt of lightning. When I lifted my head up and looked over at the line, I slammed my fist onto the wood planks and cursed into the wind. My voice echoed through the basin, sending the egrets up in flight. Every single hook was empty. All my bait was gone, taken. The little bit of line I had left had snapped, leaving me only with about 4 feet's worth. Fucking useless. The bayou was testing me at every turn. I almost didn't want to get up. Thought I might just lie there, close my eyes, and let it take me. Couldn't do that though. I still had shit to do. I took a deep breath, pulled myself back onto my feet, and flung the ruined line back into the water. I went out to the back deck, praying for crabs. Only had 4 traps left, and I'd be doing real good to catch 2 or 3 in each one. Water was a little warmer than it had been in the past week or 2, so I had high hopes. Should have known better. Empty. Ripped apart and shredded all to hell. Every single goddamn one of them. Didn't even holler that time. I laughed. I threw my head back and cackled into the face of the swarm. The turtles shot into the water. The cicadas screamed. The bullfrogs began to bellow. The toads started to sing, and the symphony of 1,000 crickets vibrated through the cypress trees. Then, the bayou suddenly fell silent. Tap, tap, tap. I about jumped right out of my skin. And then a fiery rage tore through my body like a jolt of electricity. I stomped back 3 times with the heel of my boot, slamming it down against the deck so hard it nearly cracked the brittle wood holding me up. "Oh yeah? I can do it too, motherfucker! Now what?" I was infuriated. I stood there, breathing heavy, fists balled up, just waiting for it to answer me. A few seconds passed, then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap! But it was further away this time, toward the back of the house. "Goddamn son of a bitch! It's on the move!" And then the thought dawned on me. Maybe it wasn't coming from underneath like I thought. Maybe it was coming from inside the houseboat. I ran in like a wild woman and started tossing shit around and tearing up the whole place, looking for whatever the fuck was tapping at me. Damn nutria rat or a possum done crawled up and got itself stuck somewhere. Who knows? Didn't matter what kind of swamp critter it was. When I found it, I was gonna kill it. Tap, tap, tap. I pulled out everything of the cabinets and the pantry. Tap, tap, tap. I cleared out all the closets and under the bed. Tap, tap, tap. I flipped the sofa and Kenny's recliner. Tap, tap, tap. Each time they rang out, it was coming from a different spot in the house. I was about ready to get the hammer and start ripping up the floorboards, but by that time the sun was gonna be setting soon. I'd wasted a whole nother day with this bullshit, and I was still no closer to finding the source of that incessant racket. At least my thumb wasn't bothering me no more. I gave up on my research for the night and went to the deep freezer. Only one pack of shrimp left and a bag of fish heads for the bait. I pulled both out to start thawing. With my trot line ruined and all my traps torn to pieces, I needed to go out and set up a few jug lines so I'd have something to eat the next day. Wasn't gonna be much, but a couple fiddlers was better than nothing. About an hour had passed with no tapping, but I knew it wasn't really gone. My heart was pounding something fierce and I couldn't take the silence no more. I turned on the radio and started blasting Creedence Clearwater Revival through the speakers while I gathered up some empty jugs and fashioned me some lines. I had to hurry though. That orange glow was already creeping in. Finished up just as the twilight was fading. Now I just have to bait the hooks, throw them out, and hope for the best. I picked the radio up and brought it back inside with me. Whether it was taps or silence, didn't matter. I was gonna need to drown it out. I decided to start the supper first. By then, my stomach was growling at me like a hound dog. I put a pot of grits cooking, then I went to the pantry to get a can of tomatoes to throw in there too. At least I had plenty dry goods on hand, and Kenny's last bottle of Jack. I bobbed my head to some Skinnerd while I drank from the bottle and stirred the grits. I tried to ignore it, but I could feel those taps start vibrating up from the floorboard through my feet while I was cleaning the shrimp. After I seasoned them, I put them to simmering in the saucepan with the tomatoes and some minced garlic. Then I turned the fire off the grits and covered the pot. I took a deep breath. Time to go handle up on my business. Hopefully supper would be ready by the time I was done. I dumped the fish heads into a bucket and set it down by the front door while I turned on the deck light. Then I went out front to set the jug lines. Soon as I stepped out onto the deck, something stopped me in my tracks. The salt line had been broke. A huge, muddy, wet smear draped across it, about halfway up to my door. My heart sunk. And then I heard a noise. But it wasn't the taps. This time it was different. A hiss. I slowly turned. There was something hanging onto the side of my boat, peering just over the edge from the water. I dropped the bucket of fish heads on the deck and the blood splattered across my bare legs. It was Kenny. Only it wasn't. His eyes pierced through the night like two shiny copper pennies. His skin was a dark, muddy green, completely covered in hundreds of tiny bumps and ridges. Long, yellowed nails extended from his short, thick fingers, curling to a sharp point at the ends. They dug deep into the wood, tiny splinters peeling around them as he clung to the side of the houseboat. "No," I whispered. "Feel that putain. It's you, Kenny." He recoiled in a violent snap, slithering into the black water with a loud splash. The wave rocked the houseboat, nearly tipping me over the edge. I ran back inside, slamming the door shut and locking it behind me. My chest heaved as I gasped for air. There was no mistaking it. He'd come back. My eyes shot across the galley. I needed a weapon. Tap, tap, tap. Fucking stop it, Kenny. Right as I got my hand on the knife, the houseboat began to shift. Like something trying to pull down one side and the damn thing went flying out my hand. I stumbled forward and grabbed onto the kitchen counter as the whole houseboat slowly started to tilt toward the starboard. The cabinets flew open and my Tupperware scattered all across the floor. Food went sliding off the stove and the bottle of Jack hit the ground and shattered. The motherfucker was trying to sink me. I opened up the galley window and shrieked, "Get the hell off my boat, you damn couillon!" A hand shot up from the darkness, wrapping its slimy, thick fingers around the pane of my window. Those yellow claws sunk deep into the wood below like a hot knife in butter. I swallowed hard. He wasn't trying to pull me down. He was trying to come inside. The boat slammed back as he shot up from the murky swamp and lunged through the window. I was thrown backward into the mess of hot grits and glass, knocking my head against the floor. In a split second, he was right on top of me. My husband, Kenny Thibodeau, now a monster. A reptilian abomination. A grotesque mixture of man and beast. Both, but neither. The swamp had taken him. He wrapped his massive slimy fingers around my throat, poking his claws into my skin. Then he leaned in closer. My heart flopped in my chest like a bream caught in a bucket. He was cold, he was angry, and he was hungry. Slowly, the corners of his mouth pulled back into a smile, revealing a row of razor-sharp teeth dripping with black sludge. That smell! His hot breath hit me like an oven as he opened his mouth to hiss, "Hey, Cherie, did you miss me?" His grip around my neck began to tighten. I could feel the blood starting to drain from my face. This was it. He was gonna kill me. I turned away. I didn't want his ravenous gaze to be the last thing I saw before I left this world. When I did, I noticed the knife sitting there on the floor, right next to me. I smiled, then turned back to look straight into the orange glow of his copper penny eyes. I slowly reached my arm out, wrapping my fingers around the handle, then choked out, "Yeah, Kenny, I was hoping you'd come back soon." It's been about a month now that Kenny's been gone. Such a shame they never found him. Got a freezer full of meat now, though. Good enough to last all winter. About time for Sheriff Laundry to bring back my damn pirogue. Ain't no evidence left to find. Besides, I'm gonna have to make a trip into town soon, running low on cigarettes. Might as well try to find me a new man down there too, while I'm at it. Always something on this old houseboat needs fixing. And hell, would you look at that? It's almost Halloween. Maybe I'll pick me up a witch hat and a new broom at the dollar store. That ought to be festive. All in all, life ain't too bad out here in the swamp. But every once in a while, when the bayou is still and the frogs are quiet, I can still hear the faintest little tap, tap, tap. At first, he was removed from the sea by force. He was driven inland by youth and by his inability to defy his parents' decisions. He loved the sea. The sea had raised him anyway. Years of bobbing offshore in his rowboat had bonded salt and sea foam to his character. In all regards he was a seaman, and found himself at home on the open ocean. After school, he and his friends would find themselves gathered at the water's edge, the tide oscillating at their feet, and then it would pull back into the surf. The waves balanced their docked boats, lifting them towards the sun and then allowing them to fall along the shapes of their backs. The dock with its near ancient boards groaned from the motion between the two. It was just modestly strong enough to use its arms to keep the boats from being taken to sea. A wooden rowboat was a rite of passage for the boys in town. The boy and his friends untethered their vessels and moved out into the sea. On some days they were pirates with cutlasses of driftwood. On others they were great sailors circumnavigating the globe, and by the evening they were worn out. They would find themselves back on the shore, bodies humming with warmth from their tanned skin. This was life, and thus the bonds were formed. At first, he was removed from the sea by force, but in the revelation of age, he found himself never wishing to return. The ocean is a Leviathan. It writhes and pulses in ways that are meant to keep men humble. There is no man that can control it, and to believe so is delusion. Yet, the Leviathan keeps life cold in its stomach. This graciousness turns fear into reverence. There is beauty in the chaos, and there is comfort in the fact that the ocean shows no partiality. It gives life, and it takes life. But even these words could be considered delusion. Maybe to make proclamations about it is to try to understand it. Maybe to try to understand it is to try to control it. How do we know that the ocean, this Leviathan, shows no partiality? The boy, now a man, sat reflecting on his youth. His mind found itself often fixated on the moment he was taken from the arms of the ocean. How within a week's time the town he knew so well was a shrinking line on the horizon. How his mother had cried and how his father's face had been. He saw it. Stoic, yet flared just enough to reveal that his mother wasn't the only one who'd been in tears. He never saw his rowboat again. He was never told why they left. He was never told why so many families had left the town that year that the school now groaned in old age with the dock. The explanation found itself to him years later. It had always been with him, he just had to put the pieces together. His mind now made its way down a path to the beach. He could see his friends standing in wait at the water, waving to him. He had many friends, but this one was his best. His friend stood and let the tide roll over his feet. Displaced sand rolled with it, burying him only slightly. He ran to meet him. He remembered the strands of seaweed that had been strung along the sand in a mold of where the tide had come and gone. He remembered the smell, salt and the deep fragrance of marine life. Large schools of fish had been reported in the area, and that day he and his friend were going to catch some. After an hour or so, nothing had bitten. They sat facing opposite ways of each other. The boy in towards shore and his friend out towards the open ocean. On days like this, when no other boys made a pilgrimage to the water, he knew he could rely on his friend. That's why he was the best. This is where it'll happen, I think. His friend broke a long, calming silence. Where what'll happen? The boy asked, a bit confused. Another long silence drew between them. This made the boy double curious, and he turned. Where what'll happen? This time he asked with more conviction, if not with some concern. The friend, I think I'd like to rest here a while. The boy, you mean today? I mean today and tomorrow, right down there. The friend pointed a small hand over the edge of the boat and into the black water. Why? Was all the boy could manage in regard to his friend's strange desire. I'd like to. The friend stifled a light sob. I'd like to rest. Yeah. You're scaring me. You can't go down there, you'll drown. But can't you feel it? The friend turned to him, gripping his shoulders. His fishing rod slid silently into the water, but his eyes remained intently on the boy's. He could still see it clearly in his memory. The pupils of his friend's eyes had turned a piercing black and churned hypnotically. The black had depth, like a pit, and the boy felt himself being drawn into it. Can't you hear it too? The boy felt himself enter the pit. He felt himself lowering down while salty water cascaded around him. The walls of the pit seemed just within reach, but he knew that in reaching out, he could never touch them. He continued to sink deeper into the eyes of his friend, who still held his gaze, never blinking. As he sank faster than the falling water, and the cacophonous roar was replaced with a low drone. His body was wrapped in the sound. This was the rest his friend spoke of. The burning of his shoulder muscles brought him back. His friend was gripping his shoulders so tight he could feel his pulse beating from within. He stood up, knocking his friend back. He landed back in the boat hard, now failing to hide his quiet sobs. We should go back now, the boy shouted, his voice breaking. He couldn't hide his fear and confusion. That night, the boy's friend got out of bed. He left his house, he walked down to the water, and got in his rowboat. He drowned himself. His body was never found. The boy, now a man, had run these memories through his head in a routine of mental self-harm for years now. As a boy, he knew that his friend's disappearance had played a part in his family's decision to move. However, it was only years later that he learned many other boys in town had also found themselves beckoned by the sea. Many of the rowboats had vanished from the old dock. They had all gone missing in the same place. The man shifted in his chair. He sat on the small balcony of his apartment, overlooking the city a few stories below. He knew he still had the heart of a seaman. That was why he could never go back. He hated the sea. He had to. Despite it all, though, he could damn well make out his friend's maelstrom black pupils staring down at him from the night sky. In all these years, his friend hadn't stopped calling to him, and he found himself on the edge of something dark. It had started out infrequently, an odd memory of a trauma past, but it persisted. Years passed and the man found himself almost unable to function. The memory of the pit festered in his mind like a jagged barnacle. Dwelling on it seemed to cut him up until the blood numbed his mind. In the past couple of years, he had suffered short intervals of memory loss. These intervals grew longer until entire days were lost. He knew what he had to do to relieve himself of this curse, but in doing so, he'd have to give himself up forever. In recent months, the intervals had grown exponentially. Everywhere the man turned, his friend's eyes fell upon him. The barnacle had completely enveloped his life. It had grown into every crack and hardened itself. It was more than a curse, it was a mark. The man had been marked by the sea just like those boys many years ago. The eternal thrashing of the Leviathan had never let him go. How stupid I am, the man thought to himself. Since I docked that day, I have been marked for death. He got up from his chair, made his way inside, and fell asleep one last time. He awoke to the gentle rise and fall of the ocean. On his back was the familiar texture of treated lumber. He had no idea how long he'd been unconscious, but that didn't matter now. In that time of merciful sleep, his body had found a solution. Overhead stars came down and moved like electric currents through the ever-changing ocean surface. A light mist seemed to rise from the stars' reflections and climbed up into the rowboat with the man. It rested on his skin in colonies of dew droplets. The man lay motionless, his eyes turned upward towards the sky. A low rumble shook the surrounding area, and the boat rocked in the light quake. Then came the sound of rushing water. A hole had opened in the sea. A black, frothing pit that swallowed up all into its embrace. A current took hold of the boat and began to draw it in. The man did nothing to resist. He had issued acceptance to the sea, and in doing so, a smile spread across his face. He couldn't help but let himself cry. He cried until his face bore channels of tears. They ran down his face and found outlines around his lips. They were salty and indistinguishable from the ocean water. As he drew nearer, the rushing water silenced and a familiar low drone reached up out of the pit and wrapped a gentle hand around the man. It overpowered all other noises, even the taste of tears in his mouth. This was what it meant to rest after years of anguish. The sea does show partiality. In the turning of its wheel of chaos, it had desire, and it had chosen the man. It had taken a liking to him and made it so that to be anywhere else wasn't living. Now, after years of longing for him, the man was finally returning home. In the drone, the man felt the boat give way as it crossed over the horizon of the pit. Upon taking a final look in the night sky, he was struck by its beauty. Then he closed his eyes. Every year, from October through December, a dense fog rolls into town. We call it whisper season. It fills our shores, minds, and homes with the dread of anticipation. No one knows how it began or where it came from. To most, it's trivial. It comes, it goes. Unless you are chosen. Once the sea has called your name, it takes you. The cold will cradle your body, swallowing it, leaving no crumbs. It starts with whispers, swearing that your name is being called from the shadows of the night. Then, paranoia. Louder and louder until impossible to ignore. When it starts, there's no escape. On the 14th of each December, the whispered one is found. At the edge of the dock, feet in the water, hands twisted over their ears in angles no human body should allow. On the 15th, we hold a memorial. A lone boat takes their body out to sea and never comes back. There are no graves, just a cemetery growing a collection of headstones. Empty markers for those the fog has claimed. I was 8 the first time I truly saw whisper season. The fog had already taken my sister Yara the year before. She was 19. We weren't particularly close, too many years between us, but I loved her. She treated me like a real person, not just a kid. I remember the morning, coming down the stairs to find my parents in pieces. My father stared through the window like he was watching her walk away. My mother was holding her boots like they were still warm. Her footsteps left a clear trail, out the front door, down the street, straight to the dock. What broke me was how normal she'd been the night before. She laughed at dinner, said goodnight, then, while we all slept, she listened to something none of us could hear. The fog had eaten her up and spat her out. After the memorial, my parents packed up everything she owned and shoved it into storage. No photos, no stories, no tears. Just silence, like she never even existed. I was told not to ask questions. I was too young. I wouldn't understand. And for a while, I believed that. But grief doesn't like being boxed up. And when no one would talk about her, not my parents, not my teachers, not even her friends, something started to grow in me. A curiosity, anger, or obsession. Why her? Why the fog? Why would a whole town treat this like weather? I needed answers, and no one was giving them. So I decided I'd find them myself. I had waited all year, until the fog crept back up, rolling in and out like a sleeping lung. I stayed quiet and observant. By December, my bones itched with anticipation. This time, I would find out. I would know what the grown-ups couldn't say. The morning of the 14th, I woke in the dark. My alarm blinked 4:27 a.m., casting a soft red light across my ceiling. The fog had settled thick that night, pressing against my windows. Something was waiting, breathing. I moved in silence, avoiding every creak in the floorboard. Dressed in my faded navy blue pajama set, I shivered. It was too light for the cold, but I didn't dare open my dresser and risk waking up my parents. I slipped out the front door and into the breath of the fog. The cold bit through my sleeves instantly. I moved like a shadow. The dogs came into view suddenly, sneaking up on me like a suppressed memory. The air grew colder, thicker, angrier, like walking through the smoke of a burning house. And then, a shape. He was already there, imprisoned by the dock. Alan Bager sat at the edge barefoot, ankles submerged in water, arms bent over his ears in a way that turned my stomach. My legs locked and my breath hitched. I knew him. He was kind, warm, just 18 years old. He was the boy who helped me with my homework, the boy who carried his sister's backpack for 6 weeks when she broke her arm, and the boy who gave me a wink last week as I struggled to park my bike. At first, I thought he might have been praying, until I saw his back. Curved like a question mark, spine twisted, he resembled a puppet with strings pulled too tight. Then his arms, God, his arms! Bent, twisted, wrong. They folded up and over his ears like a statue about to collapse, his bones jagged through his skin like broken branches. Fingers curled and clutched at the sides of his skull. I stepped closer and the smell hit me. A culmination of salted rot, like something inside the earth had opened. His eyes were open, dry and wide, staring into the fog like they were one. Alan and the fog, one of the same. My legs gave, vomit spewing out of me. I slowly got back up, still retching. I wanted to run, scream, to disappear forever. But I knew I couldn't leave him like that. I gently whispered his name. Nothing. Again, a little louder this time. Brief silence, then his lips began to move. No sound came out, just his mouth shaping words over and over like he was reciting a prayer underwater. I took a deep breath and leaned in, wrapping my hands with a deathly grip around his sleeves. Then I heard it. My name. Faint. A gurgling. Being spoken through him, not from him. I let go, stumbling and running, not looking back. I don't remember getting home. Just the cold sweat, the sobbing, the images burned into my eyelids. That night, I didn't sleep. At the memorial, I kept my head down. My hands were trembling, warm, acidic tears streaming down my face. When Aylin's mother spoke, I swear she looked straight at me, like she knew I'd seen him and done nothing to save him. After that, I couldn't sleep. Not really. With my eyes closed, Aylin would visit me. His twisted form and soulless eyes. I would be back at the dock, the gurgling of my name echoing around me. I would wake up in a cold sweat, gasping for air, feeling like I drowned. I couldn't stand the smell of salty rot from my skin, the hearing of his voice calling me, crying for me. It was the fog. I knew that now. The fog had taken Yara and Aylin, and soon it would be coming for me. Then, December 14th hit, and the town was thrown into chaos. That year, the fog took someone different. Someone younger. Chloe Dorrance, 15 years old. It wasn't supposed to happen. It never happened before. The whispers were always reserved for the older ones, the adults. At most, it took teenagers who were crossing over into adulthood. Maybe they were strong enough to handle it. Not Chloe, though. She was just a child. It was the first time the fog had chosen someone so young, and the town could feel it. The rippling horror no one dared to confront. The adults tried their best to hide it. Hushed voices, eyes darting, voices tightening. But the panic in their faces was hard to hide. My parents kept me close, told me to stay inside, to never go even remotely near the docks again. I knew what it meant. I knew what I had done. It was a tragedy, a violation of the natural order, and I was to blame for it. The town tried burying its grief in silence, just like they did with Yara and Aylin. Nevertheless, we all knew we weren't safe. Chloe Dorrance might have been the first, but she wouldn't be the last. The time following Chloe's tragedy, the town stayed panicked. In quiet ways, persistent and aggressive. Locks were changed, curfews reinforced. Even doors were bolted down. Every child was monitored closely, held onto like a single gust of wind would condemn them to the sea, carrying them away forever. To no avail, because next year it was Jylan Mill. He turned 12 just 3 days prior. He was bright, soft-spoken, and we often built towers of playing cards during recess. He always wore mismatched socks and had a slight lisp. His parents loved him. He was an only child, their little miracle. After Chloe, they went into lockdown, literally. Their doors bolted down, windows sealed shut. They refused to let him out of their sight. He didn't come to school, he didn't go outside. I heard they even slept in the same room to make sure he was never alone. But the fog doesn't care about bolts, or locks, or love. It took him. The night before his memorial, the air filled with something loud, awakening everyone. It was metal, screaming. My parents barged in and held me down instinctively. They knew it had started again. I managed to slip from their grip and ran to the porch. In the street, families were starting to gather, spilling from their homes. In their coats and slippers, eyes wide and stunned. Surprisingly, the fog didn't fill the air, which made it worse. It was clearer, visible to most. That's when we saw where the sound was coming from. Jylan. Every door was bolted, every window sealed, it didn't matter. He wasn't climbing out the window, he wasn't walking through the door. He was squeezing through the mail slot. His bones bent in ways that weren't just unnatural, it was impossible. A young boy who was folding himself, flattening, warping. His limbs staggered through the slot, one after the other. The metal screamed and tore as the slot stretched. It shouldn't have. It was a standard mail slot, but it was at least 50 times as big, resembling a shrieking mouth. No one spoke. What could we even say? Of course, Jylen's parents were screaming, pulling, pleading. He didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't blink. His face was blank and calm, focused with the same distant stare as Aylin's. His mother clawed at him. His father wedged a crowbar in the slot, attempting to stop him. But the fog had already taken hold of Jylen. By the time he made it to the dock, his body barely resembled the kind boy I'd known. His legs were fractured in 4 places, some bones poking through his mismatched socks. He even slithered more than he walked. Then the fog swallowed him, while the town erupted in haunting screams. Jylen's memorial was way worse than Chloe's. Worse than anyone who had come before. Half the town didn't dare to attend. Those who did wouldn't speak. What made it worse was the sound of Jylen's bones crunching as they moved him to the boat. A few people vomited. My father cried more than he had for Yara. The fog had made it very clear. It doesn't care about age, or innocence, or protection. You can lock the doors, board the windows, even tie your child down and keep a weapon at your side. It won't matter. When the fog wants you, it will find you. And I hear it. As I'm lying awake, the clock is turning to 4:27 a.m. The whispering of their voices crashing like waves against my ears. Should I start with just like saying my inspiration for it, like what I had in mind?
Let's and then people can ask questions, but I think we'd all love to hear that.
All right. I searched like for the nautical horror. I knew I didn't want to do like actual ocean stuff. I wanted to do something different. So I searched for like folklore horrors that had to do with the ocean but weren't based on the ocean itself. So I found I believe it's a folklore from somewhere in Europe. I think I don't remember it in every detail, but it is about a fog whispering people's names and luring them into the ocean, but it has sirens in the water. But I wanted to keep it like a bit more mystique, so people could theorize more about what could be the source of the fog. So that's the inspiration I had. And then I knew I wanted to do some like disgusting bodily horror with it. So that's where I like based it on.
What made you think of the mail slot? Did that just kind of come to you?
Well, I had an even worse idea in my mind. I knew I wanted to do something with like him seeing Aylin and that setting off like a chain reaction for the victims to become younger and younger, because he's 8 the first time, and the time he finds he sees Jylen, he's 10. So I wanted to do it in like an order where he's the youngest after Jylen that gets picked. But my original idea, that is such a nasty graphic idea, but I was gonna do a baby that is in a crib, and I was gonna wedge it through the ridges of the crib and out of the window and making all the windows like pop out.
Jeez.
but that's so horrific that I thought maybe I need to like adjust it a little bit. And then I was discussing it with my partner, and they said like, what if you would do a mail slot, like somebody trying to crawl out of a mail slot? And I was like, oh my god, that's also so bad. So
That's
that's where I
cool.
got that idea.
So
Yeah,
the mail slot was the toned down option.
yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah, yeah.
That
I was
was the
also
first
gonna.
option was too intense.
Yeah, I would. What my original idea was that I would make the story longer and have him join one of the boats that had the body of the Whispered One, and I wanted to do like after Jylen, I had like another idea for Jylen. After that, I wanted to have someone try to leave with their family, and then the car being pulled back because the child was pressed up on the back window, like being like taken and like with a magnetic pull to the docks, like from way somewhere else. And then after that I was gonna do like the baby or small child scene, and then I was gonna do my main character being like, I can't deal with this anymore, I need to know what's happening, I feel so guilty because he feels like he started it. So I cut some stuff out, and I thought ending it with the mail slot and then just my main
Hmm.
character being like haunted would be a good like cutoff.
I think it worked perfectly. It kind of climaxed and then left you hanging.
Thanks.
Um,
Yeah, that was my intention.
so Goblin asked, "Have you read The Mist?"
No, I have not. I haven't.
And
Is it similar?
abbreviation David says pretty good book. So
Hmm.
interesting.
I'll put it on my list.
Rude Dude said the names of the people are very unique and it makes it feel even more mystical. Where do the names come from?
I literally just threw like syllables together. I was just like, okay, I want a name with an A, and the name Aelin I actually got from old English names, but the rest of them I just like thought, okay, Jylen, Jylen Mill, like I just put
Wow.
random shit together.
That's insane because I am so bad at coming up with names. My characters are always like just a generic name, Ryan or like
I mean
Tom.
that also works.
It's
That's not like
always
less than Robert. Robert.
Jylen is a very cool name.
Yeah, I kind of Jylen. I might have gotten the inspiration from Avatar, like the Avatar, the Legend of Korra, because you have Bolin. So I
Hmm,
think in my mind I just like flipped it around a bit to like make it to Jylen instead of Bolin.
interesting.
But
Um,
I just threw together random shit until I thought, okay, that sounds right.
Waterhouse Films wants to know what horror films, if any, inspired you in your writing.
Hmm. Um, let me think of that. I don't think I necessarily had like one inspiration of like a movie or a book, but I really love like the supernatural, but not like obviously supernatural. Like you could go very many ways, like Hereditary. I really love Hereditary.
Amazing movie.
Um, yeah, I love that one so much. Um, and also like Talk to Me, the new one by A24. I love that one as well. Um, so I think I just like when a story gives me a lot of options to like fantasize about what is happening. And I didn't know how I wanted to like end it. So if I wanted to do a longer ending or like shorter one. So I wanted to leave a lot of room for me to either do something with sirens or like have it be some like paranormal thing, or um I was also thinking about doing a Wendigo kind of thing, that there were Wendigos eating the people or something like that. So I originally wanted my character to go in with the boat and just find an island full of like
eaten bodies and full of wendigos, but I just left that part out.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely, the story feels very tight and very like everything has a purpose. It's all driving everything forward.
Thanks.
And I am a sucker for body horror, and people twisting themselves through
Me
mail slots was
too.
not a thing I thought I ever considered, but
Yeah.
I enjoyed it very much.
Me too. I love bodily horror. I love, like, I knew I wanted to take it like somewhere weird. I wanted to do something like so gruesome that you would like feel it crawl under your skin. Cuz I always love like when I like get the urge to scratch my skin off by something being so like bodily horror-ish.
Yeah. It's the you like physically react and you're like, "Ooh."
Yeah. I love that
Cool.
feeling. So I'm glad to see that other people enjoyed it the
Yeah.
way I intended it to.
It definitely had that effect.
Awesome.
What you guys got any other questions before we wrap up? It doesn't seem like it, so I guess I'll just end it off by saying thank you to Noah. You did such an incredible job with the narration and the
Thank you.
voices. You really put your all into it. And everybody in the chat, just spam fire emojis.
Thank you so much. And thank you for recording it and gonna do all the editing stuff. I really
Yes.
appreciate that as well, and I think you're gonna drop a fire video for the narration, a fire recording.
Yes.
So I'm so hyped about that as well.
I will edit it together and we'll be putting it up somewhere for people to enjoy. And then also thank you to the chat. You guys were all really cool. As
Yeah.
always, this community is amazing.
Yeah.
And to everyone who entered into the contest, it was an incredibly high standard, and everyone in the shortlist should be. I mean, you can tell by the quality of the story just how strong the competition was.
I'm so hyped for the next one. I'm so hyped to see
Yes.
what people come up with.
And we are in the middle of the autumn theme. So if anyone here is listening and enjoyed this and has not submitted, you've still got plenty of time. November 14th is the deadline. And tenors can tell me if I'm lying, but I believe November 14th. So
Oh
if
my
you
god, already. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
just encouraging people to submit and get in on this because it's a great time. We're right in the middle of one. And then this was the short list. So these were the kind of the finalists that got selected from the last event. So for the autumn event, there'll be an event just like this for the autumn prompt.
Yeah.
And so go submit your stories.